You won the game. Now it's time to build a legacy. Dr. Paul Jenkins joins us on the pod today, where we're going to discuss mastering our minds and the directions of our legacies. With all the crises all over the world, this is such an inflective time to be able to speak with you, Dr. Paul. Welcome to the pod.
Oh, thank you, Rick. I'm glad to be on your mic this time. You were recently a guest on my show.
Yes.
And
yes.
that was a lot of fun. So I've been looking forward to another conversation here today.
I have as well, Paul. And I think that most men listening to this podcast have spent a good portion of their lives winning financially. They've got the balance sheet, they've got the titles, they've got the respect of their peers. But there's this silent growing anxiety among the high achievers that once the growth phase of the career ends, their relevance ends too, as if their relevance and their careers cohabitate. So I want to know from you as a professional, why does the very brain that built success, built a career, often become the biggest and most negative obstacle to enjoying our lives?
Great question to ask the positivity psychologist, right? Here's where my brain went with that immediately, Rick. Our brain has two primary jobs, and we can't turn these off. Our brain is going to do this for us no matter what. Those two jobs are to keep us safe and to prove us right. And both of those get in our way all the time. Think about this for a minute. Your brain's job to keep you safe, okay? This is essential because it's constantly on the lookout for danger, for threat. And anytime it picks up on a threat, it kicks us into what we call the fight or flight response. And I know you're familiar with this. It happens to all humans. Our brain wants us to live and breathe another day. So if we pick up on I just came back from Africa. If there's a lion trying to attack us, it's going to kick into emergency mode and try to get our feet moving fast enough to keep us from becoming lunch. Okay, so this is what our brain is trying to do for us. But then also our brain is there to prove us right. And the number one error that we make as humans is that we believe what we think.
Wow.
And that is an error, first of all, because it doesn't mean we're right. It just means we know we're right.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. So as you pose this question to me, I'm thinking about my own life. I'm thinking about a lot of the men that I know, men and women, who develop a story. Okay, and I'm calling it a story on purpose. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying it's a story. It's a narrative in our brain that says, when I retire, when I'm done with this or that, when I've checked that box, then there is no more purpose. And it's just a story, but the problem is our brain knows that we're right about that.
And so we have this proclivity for confirmation bias. That's what I would relate this to, right? We have this need for the thoughts in our minds to develop the reality that we experience. It seems that it can happen for the good or for the bad. And those two types of people, the person that thinks positively versus the person that has this fear-driven confirmation bias, they have two different outcomes in the end.
Yeah. And you popped out with, the psychobabble term that we've applied to that. Confirmation bias it has everything to do with that second job of our brain, to prove us right. Because once we adopt a story, and usually we're going to adopt a story that's likely to keep us safe, okay? Calling back to the first job of our brain, we'll adopt some story to keep us safe, like it's not safe, for example, to launch into an entrepreneurial venture.
Yeah. Keep expectations low.
Yes. don't risk anything, and we talk about some of those later years in life as, well, you can't afford to risk. I was meeting with my financial advisor last week. He's like, well, you're at a phase of life where we want to minimize risk. And I'm like, there it is, right? My brain wants to keep me safe. So it says low risk. And anything that you do to lean in to a purpose or a calling or something that you feel, is your life's purpose, anything like that looks like a risk. And there are risks involved. I mean, let's be real about that. But there's risks involved with being a citizen of the planet. And spoiler alert, nobody gets out of this alive. So
there's being risk. Just being is a risk.
Welcome to Earth. Yeah, it's a risky place.
Okay, so step back for a second. So you've got these two different alternatives. So we can pursue something that has meaning implicit in it, something that we love, something we feel called to, and hopefully that's enough to overcome that execution risk, that risk aversion, that risk of ego, which I think is probably a big portion of what we're trying to avoid right now, is hurt on our own ego. But then there's certain types of work that we don't feel called to, or we don't feel like a divine calling. We definitely don't feel like we have a skill set, but we know it has to be done. I think of, cases maybe like when you're in Africa where you see someone that's impoverished, that maybe needs a hand up or a kind word, that sort of thing. You don't have time to do it. You don't feel called to that person. You'll never see that person again, but you still make that effort, not knowing whether you're going to be rebuffed or not. And so I think that there are these two different scenarios. One where we know that our purpose could be fulfilled if we execute on that, and that purpose is enough to overwhelm the risk that we're willing to take. But in some things we do, it seems that there's not a benefit to offset that risk, but we know we still have to do it. How do we get our mind straight in operating in scenarios like that, Paul?
I'm thinking about what is it that gets in the way, because our brain's job to keep us safe is going to have us avoiding the risks, yes. Right? There was a book that I read years ago by Dr. Susan Jeffers. The title is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And the title's every bit as good as the book. But she points out in the book that every fear, think about this for a minute and how it ties into your question. Every fear is based on a common belief, all right? And that belief at the root of every fear is, I can't handle that. Mm-hmm. At some level, right? It comes down to, I can't handle that. If I can't handle something, that's a huge alarm going off for my keep me safe brain.
Yes.
And it's not even true. Think about this for a minute. You've got 100% track record for handling everything that has ever happened in your whole life. You've got a really good track record. So why does our brain step in and say, oh, I don't think you could handle that? And it comes down to a what if question. Okay? And the question is not even the problem. It's the answer that's the problem. When our brain says, well, what if? Okay, what if I fail, for example? What if you talk about ego, right? The ego has to succeed, has to be seen as the I'm in charge kind of thing. And my life experience tells me when I first do something, I suck at it. But you have to be willing to suck at it.
That's right.
Right? Let me give you a little example of this. In fact, hang on. I've got one right here, okay? The cube, right? I've started to solve this one. I use this in some of my leadership training that I do, because sometimes people will look at this and they'll say, my brain doesn't work like that. My nephew can do that. My brain doesn't work like that, right? Not true. Your brain does have the ability to solve this. There are 10 steps. I can teach them to you. And if I'm doing a 3-day event with people, they get one of these on day 1 and they have to solve it before they go home.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Okay, what happens in your brain when you learn that you can do this? And there are 4 rules. I think you're going to appreciate rule number 1. Okay. Be willing to mess it up. That's rule number 1.
Yeah.
And when I hand someone a brand new cube, I mean, picture this perfectly solved. It's all pristine and exactly as it should be, right? And they're like, oh. And they don't dare mess it up. They think, oh, I'll never see it that way again, right? Rule number 1 is you got to be willing to mess it up. Rule number 2 is learn your moves. There's 10 of them. And I know all of them, and I can teach them to you, and you can learn them. Learn your moves. Rule number 3 is practice your moves. Because once you learn it, it doesn't mean you can go solve this cube. You got to do some reps. You got to program it into your neural pathways. And then rule number 4, help your neighbor. Because once you learn how to solve this, guess what? There's other people still trying to figure it out.
Yes.
And then you can help them. And I saw this with my daughter, because I taught my daughter how to solve this. I didn't teach my wife. She wasn't open to that at the time.
I understand. I understand completely.
But then my daughter taught my wife.
Oh, wow.
And now my wife can solve this in just a couple of minutes, which is really cool. But what I witnessed there, Rick, is that my daughter's level of mastery went up when she taught her mom how to solve a Rubik's Cube. And so I love this as a metaphor for what we're talking about here. Be willing to mess it up. And going back to Dr. Susan Jeffers and her idea of every fear has at its root this common belief that I can't handle it. What if I fail? I can't handle that. Well, yeah, you can. And in fact, failure is a necessary component to learning whatever you get to learn. Because when you first start, you suck at it. Yeah. Allow yourself to suck at it. And I think especially at a phase of life when you've got a lot of stuff in the rearview mirror. Because there's still a lot of life ahead of you. And if you're not sure, there's a little test. You put 2 fingers right here. If you feel a little bump, you're not done yet.
And it seems like the wise thing to do with those iterations is that the wiser you are, the more you've got in the rearview mirror, the more risk you should be embracing. Not only because you've got more of these successes in your past that you survived every single one of them, but that you had that little bit of a gut feeling that you know what it's like to lose, and you know that that's besides death, the maximal downside for most of us is usually risk of embarrassment, risk of ego, risk of wealth diminishment. That you should increase your profile for risk the older you get, because you have more iterations behind you, and you have more lessons, more feedback loops, more. And even probably more endurance to push ahead. And we probably do the opposite, like your wealth advisor. Take less risk. We should probably be taking more risk, I would imagine.
And, when it comes to risk, this is probably worth exploring a little bit, because I think there's 3 things we can do with risk. And an example, okay, I've got one of my favorite places to have lunch right across the street here from my office. Now, the street next to my office is State Street. It's like 4 lanes on both sides. And we're situated right here between 2 major universities. So most of the drivers out there are younger than 25 years old. Are you tracking this?
Yes.
For me to cross State Street, risky. Okay? Now, I saw a bumper sticker that says, look, if you don't like the way I drive, stay off the sidewalk. So risky, right? So the three things we can do. I'm hungry. I want lunch. The restaurant is over there. So I've got a risk. Now, one of the things I can do is avoid the risk. Avoid it. And that means I'm not going. Too risky. I'm going to sit down on this side of the street. Okay, that's avoiding the risk. Now, is that safer? Yeah, I mean, there's the thing about the sidewalk.
Yeah.
But arguably, yeah, safer. What's the downside?
No food.
Yeah, no lunch. So avoiding risk maybe reduces the danger, but you don't get any payoff from that. Well, let's try another option. How about ignoring the risk? Let's just ignore it. I'm going to put on the blinders. I'm going to hope for the best and step into that street. Okay? Ignoring risk increases danger. Is that fair?
Yes.
And I still don't get the payoff, most likely. So the third option is to manage the risk. And that's where I take a little walk about a half a block that way. I come to an intersection. There's a button. I push the button. I wait for the little image to say, oh, you can walk now. I still look both ways. Right? Because the light, I got hit through a red light once. It totaled my truck.
Oh, my.
So, you're still going to look both ways. Managing risk doesn't eliminate it. It brings it close enough to zero that we accept that risk and we go. We move. That maximizes the chance of the return and minimizes, doesn't eliminate, minimizes the risk. We already talked about how Earth is an inherently risky place to live. So we're not going to get rid of the risk. Every time you get into a vehicle, you get in and you reach over and you grab the little device and you drag it across your body and click it in.
Yes.
Seat belts do not prevent accidents. They don't. What they do is they bring the risk of your injury in an accident close enough to zero that you accept the risk by clicking it in. It's your physical way of saying, I accept the risk. Let's go. So that's where my brain went with that, Rick. I don't know. What do you want to do with that?
Yeah. So all right. So you set forth the three options. One is the person that decides they're not going to go. It's too risky. The other person is the one that sort of walks with blinders on. The third one is the person that mitigates the risk. Obviously, the person that mitigates the risk goes to the stop sign. That's the smarter of the three people. But if you only have the first two options, and we have an infinite number of iterations of this, where we can do this every hour on the hour for our entire lives, it seems that if my choice is always either not going, not taking a risk, or being a little bit reckless and haphazard to take risks, that the more risk I take that have some sort of offsetting benefit that counter the downside risk, in the end, I get better at handling risk in other scenarios in the other parts of my life. I guess that's an open-ended question, Paul. What kind of person is better if you have an infinite number of those iterations? Ends up in a better situation.
That's the video game philosophy, right?
Okay.
You get clobbered and you're like, oh crap, well, let's restart, right? Yeah. Restart. The thing about our mortal existence here on planet Earth is that some risks will be game over.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the fear. But game over is coming. Game over is coming. And when we mitigate or manage the risk, I like to think of this as an educated guess.
Okay.
Because you still might get clobbered in the crosswalk with the light in your favor. You could still get clobbered. But you're accepting that level of risk, because what's the alternative? When we avoid the risk, we don't get any payoff, right?
Yeah.
I was interviewing on my podcast, I was interviewing an undertaker. And Rick, I
Wow.
thought that was an Old West term, right? He chooses that. He puts it on his business card. Undertaker. And he said, I love that term because it's a huge undertaking when someone dies to take care of the body, to take care of the family, to make all of the arrangements, to deal with the health department. It's a huge undertaking. And so he calls himself an undertaker. And he shared this with me. He said, and I think he was quoting someone by the name of Sachs when he said, death is more universal than life. Because all men die, but not all men truly live. And that's what we're talking about here. When you mitigate the risk, you're jumping in to life. And there's an educated guess. So, we can be reckless, put on the blindfold and just step into the street. Probably you're going to get clobbered. But what about an educated guess? And there's two parts to that, right? There's educated, excuse me, and there's guess. And the educated part is everything in your rearview mirror. It's your wisdom. It's your life experience. You've been around the block a few times. This isn't your first rodeo. It might be the first time you're going to a rodeo riding an ostrich, but you've been to the rodeo before. You know what I'm saying? So you've got all that experience. That's the educated part. Be wise. And then there's the guess, because you don't know what's going to happen.
That's right. And if you stay in your office for lunch, you accept other unknown risks as well, that someone could break in and rob you. There's an infinite number of risks out there.
You can choke on your PB&J.
Yeah, all by yourself in your office. That's right. I had lunch alone in my office today, and I was thinking the exact same thing. So let me put forth a possible four scenario, right?
Okay.
So we don't go haphazardly, recklessly, with blinders on. We mitigate a risk. We go to stoplight. Mm-hmm. So and I think maybe we discussed this very briefly in our conversation, because I was doing a book launch. And in the book, I make the comment that a sign of a wise person, because you mentioned wisdom a second ago, the sign of a wise man is that he's always looking to flip threats into opportunities. He has this knack of being able to do that. And I'm not saying that's something that most of us can do on a regular basis, but when he sees the threats, when you're Elon, you see the expense of going against a government agency to outcompete the government agency for reusable rockets that someone's never done before. You see these sorts of threats where you're definitely probably going to lose all your money because you're competing against the federal government. He sees an opportunity through it, and he figures out a way through sheer effort and mental ingenuity. It seems like someone like that is able to create a force scenario where those of us sort of in our regular lives, we're looking at the 2 or 3 scenarios. What are your thoughts about the relationship between threats and opportunities and one becoming the other?
I love where you're going with that. In fact, in my book, Rick, I coined a term, propertunity, combining the word problem and opportunity.
Oh, wow. What a great word.
It's a propertunity. And one of the examples that I shared in my book was at 3M. they were trying to come up with a strong adhesive. They came up with a weak adhesive instead. Big problem, big failure. Well, that weak adhesive, somebody there, and I can't remember all the names right off the top of my head, but somebody there working at 3M was also singing in a choir. And he was looking for some way to keep the bookmarks in his hymnal from falling out, as they were going through in their choral presentations. And this weak adhesive solved that. The weak adhesive, and it became what we now know as Post-it notes.
Wow.
Weak adhesive, massive failure, big problem, or propertunity, right? It became one of the best-selling products that 3M ever came out with. An industry leader. When we have a problem, and think about this too, every business, the only reason the business exists is because of a problem.
That's right.
Why would a business exist otherwise? It's there to solve problems that people have. I also loved a quote from Pirates of the Caribbean, Captain Jack Sparrow, the wisdom of Captain Jack, right? And he says, some people think that having a problem is a problem. Having a problem isn't the problem. Thinking that the problem is a problem, now that's the problem.
That's great.
And if you can follow the wobbly logic there, sometimes we think that a problem is a problem, but really it's just an opportunity.
So are there other mechanisms? You're talking about labeling, like mental labeling. If I see this person as a problem person, they're always going to seem like they're a problem person. If I see this adhesive as too weak, it's always going to be too weak. I'll never find the ingenuity to be able to make something out of it. Yeah. Whenever I label things problems, it seems that they always tend to end up as problems in my own mind, but other people can label those things as successes or something, or failures that turn into lessons, and they can use that as an asset for us. What does the role of labeling have to do with what we get out of life? Because I know that sometimes we think too negatively, and our negative labeling of things and people, that gets us off on the wrong course.
What we think actually matters. Okay, again, coming from the positivity psychologist, what we think matters. And when you're talking about labels, let's explore that a little bit, because what we label something determines how we interact with that thing. So think about that a little bit. What we name or label something determines how we interact with that thing. It doesn't change the thing, but it changes how we interact with it. Okay, so for example, well, let's take a zebra. Okay, I got to see some zebras when I was in Africa recently, and it's a beautiful animal. Okay, a zebra. Now, I call it a zebra because that's what people told me to call it. But I've labeled it as this beautiful animal that is fascinating to me, and I love to watch it and look at it. Okay? Now, you might think, well, okay, how does that demonstrate anything? I did not label it lunch. Mm-hmm. Okay, now, how do I interact with what I've labeled a zebra? I watch it. I marvel at it. I'm amazed by it. How do I interact with lunch? I eat it.
Yeah.
And there were other animals out there that do label zebras lunch. And they kill them and eat them. Okay, and we saw, on my first trip to Kenya, I saw 2 male lions eating a Cape buffalo.
Oh, wow.
And on this trip, I got to see a group of hyenas eating a topi. So if you label it lunch, it changes how you interact with it. And that's just an example, using a recent experience out on the savannah.
So, all right, so we're in our normal life. So, we're going to work, we're dealing with people, we're dealing with circumstances here. In the end, what is more important, the nature of the object or the scenario, or the labeling of that object or scenario? What's more powerful, like what the thing truly is or what you think the thing truly is?
Only one of those even exists in your mind. Only one of them. We don't know what something truly is. All we have is our perception of it. And that can be tainted and manipulated by our culture, our traditions, our perception. And perception's all we've got. It's like we're looking at the world from inside of a box, okay, through a little lens. It's called paradigm. It's our worldview. And if the lens is changed to a different color, the world looks different to us. And in a similar way, the way that we see the world is created and crafted by our culture, our upbringing, our language, our programming. And programming is powerful. It's strong. English, for example. Okay, Rick, you and I are having this conversation in English. It's not the only language.
It's not.
No, but it sure does come naturally to us, doesn't it?
Sure
Did
does.
you choose to speak English?
Nope.
No. You were programmed by people who didn't even give you a choice. And that's not the only thing they programmed you with. One of my colleagues used to work right down the hall from me here, and he came by one day and he said, Dr. Paul, I've got this new book I want to write. I want to run the title by you. Nature or nurture? Either way, it's your parents' fault. And I'm like, well, that's not very positive, but kind of true too, right? I mean, we are programmed, and then that's what we roll with. English is not the only language. The way you see relationships, not the only option. The way you perceive the world, the way you understand God, relationships, nature, all of that's been programmed in. And so our programming is really strong. And it doesn't mean we're right, although our brain's job is to prove us right. And that has us treating each other terribly sometimes.
What is the more real thing? Let's look over maybe a 50-year perspective. Let's say you're a 20-year-old man, you're going to work till you're 70, and you have one of two ways to approach your work life and your home life. The first way would be to rigorously analyze the situation, analyze the people, come to determination based off the facts of what they seem to be doing, who they are they truthful or not, that sort of thing. Or you could take the approach that you're always maximally opportunistic and optimistic about each scenario and each person that you run into, and you accept the defeats and the disappointments that come, and you refuse to let that impact other areas. It seems like the first man who's so inquisitive and technical about his evaluation of things is going to be worried about a whole lot more in the end, as opposed to the second man who always assumes the best out of every scenario. And it seems like maybe even that second man could have the scenarios in the end if there's enough stacked positivity that these external positive scenarios that he's viewed as positive scenarios seem to be operating and working together on their own for external benefit, not just benefit that's happening within his mind, but also benefit that's actually happening in reality. How do we, is it better overall to have a default setting that we evaluate the circumstances and the people on a technical basis. We're looking for the absolute truth of what they are and what actually happened. Or B, to look at it as a system of scenarios and productive maneuvers, no matter how negative it looks, that will fulfill ultimate benefit for us and those we love.
What you're asking here brings to my mind a definition of humility.
Okay.
That I've really come to appreciate and embrace. And that definition is giving up our need to be right in exchange for being open. I remember another time I was interviewing Rick DeBrule on my podcast. He's a longtime commentator for NASCAR, and he's made his career in communications and especially television and in the NASCAR space. And as I was talking to Rick, he said something about how we should always assume that we don't have all of the information. And I tried to capture that, and I repeated it back to him. I said, okay, so Rick, you said earlier that we shouldn't assume that we have all of the information. And he said, no, Paul, that's not what I said. Did you hear how I changed it? I didn't at the time. He said, Paul, you said that we shouldn't assume that we have all of the information. That's not what I said. I said we should assume that we don't. And that really landed for me. We should always assume that we don't have the information. Remember, our brain is trying to keep us safe and prove us right. And so even the way you presented the question, you're talking about, can we take a very analytical, technical approach to this? Well, that's just one way our brain convinces us that we're right. And we get to maybe give up our need to be right in exchange for being open. So I'm really leaning toward your second option that you gave us. Can we be more open? Can we be humble enough to realize that our brain is trying to prove us right about something? And once we settle on a narrative, once we choose or select a story, oh, this person is whatever, then our brain is going to be working overtime to prove us right about that. And we'll be pointing to the data that we have gathered. And this confirmation bias that you mentioned earlier, Rick, this is our brain will find, look for, and discover, and even create and fabricate evidence that we're right. That would never hold up in a court of law. You can't just go fabricate evidence, but we do it all the time. One of my clients, this is just an example of how that works. I was working with a couple years ago, and they were having some turbulence. She was convinced, and she knew she was right too, that he was having an affair. All right, now he was convinced that he wasn't. In fact, he couldn't find that anywhere in his heart or in his life. So anyway.
I don't have the time or the energy for that.
I know. He's like, what are you talking about? Anyway, he went and bought her a dozen red roses and presented them to her. Okay? Now, those red roses became red roses. In other words, she read into that. See? I told you. Look what he did. This just proves, what? Is he feeling guilty? He never brings me roses. And so for her, that was proof. That was evidence.
Yeah.
He was having an affair. And meanwhile, he's like, oh, crap. Anything I do or don't do will be taken as data or information or evidence that she's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've mentioned this a couple of times, the idea that there's information that we don't know. There's probably a lot of this blind spots. There's stuff on like on our behalf that we can't see, we don't notice. Maybe it's logical fallacies that we ourselves possess, or temperament. We're always negative about certain things or certain people, so we can't give a proper judgment to that, or we just literally just don't have the time or the interest to see the other information out there, and so we make these assumptions.
Yeah.
What's the best way to work on our blind spot avoidance or blind spot identification? Obviously, I never realize it by myself. It always takes someone else that I trust pointing it out to me for me to realize. And I think that's probably pent up in the definition of a blind spot.
I love this because my job as a psychologist is to illuminate the obvious. And this is so cool. I get paid to tell people things they already know. But there's obvious things that are completely unnoticed, right? Like the fact that we're speaking English. You didn't notice that before I called it to your attention, but it's obvious, right? Mm-hmm. Or the feeling of your shirt. Can you feel it? Now.
Yeah.
No, you can't, right? That's where a lot of our cognition is. It's in this space of obvious but unnoticed. And so it gets called to your attention. Another way to think about this, we were talking about being inside of a box, and maybe our whole experience is projected on the inside of this box. That's all we can see. And there's instructions for getting out of your box printed on the outside of your box. So sometimes you need somebody to read the instructions to you. And when you become aware of it, awareness precedes choice. And until you're aware of it, you don't have a choice. You just default to your programming. So I think, going back to our discussion about humility, what if we could give up our need to be right in exchange for being open, and then employ coaches and mentors? And, one thing I learned about you, Rick, is that you like to read old books. You like to see how someone else has interpreted the instructions over the ages, right? And be humble enough to be open to people who have reasons to know. And that's, I think, where we go, because we have blind spots. Think about what Rick said. Always assume that you don't have the data. Always assume that, because that puts you in a position of openness. And that openness creates all kinds of possibilities that we never even saw. We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to discover,
Yeah. So you laid out a formula a second ago. You said awareness is what?
Awareness precedes choice.
Okay, walk me through that awareness, because awareness typically has to do with the idea of attention, and I can't give attention to everything at one time. I can only really give attention to one thing. So that means I've got to kind of, if I want to be aware of my scenario, aware of my surroundings, aware of my situation, I've got to be able to give my attention to multiple things at the same time. But I can never really see me. I've always got to rely on that second person that's pointing out the blind spots to be able to say, no, Rick, you do this every single time you get in this situation. But walk me through this idea of awareness and the importance of that, and what we get whenever we begin being aware of the important things in life.
And thank you for that question, because this is really at the core of the work that I do. I told you my job is to illuminate the obvious. But there are obvious things that are completely unnoticed. And when it comes to awareness, I'm going to introduce a psychobabble term here. Metacognition. Now, I say it's psychobabble because we make up words in psychology. It makes us feel smart. And this is one of those. If you break it down, cognition means thinking. And if we put that right here at this level, pardon me, metacognition is a higher level. It's thinking about thinking. Now, this gets a little loopy, so stay with me, but notice in this moment that you can do that. You can think about your own thinking. This is huge because metacognition, the ability to think about our own thinking, to go to that higher level, creates a little space. And in that space is where choice exists. Until you see it as a choice, it's not. And you'll just roll with your programming. You will default to your programming.
So in order to evaluate your thinking, you have to be in a position above your thoughts in order to see them as they are and distance yourself from the thoughts. You really, if you're up there, you're not only seeing the thought for what you thought it was, but also for what it might be, or maybe what it should be, or what the alternative to that would be. Like I'm a big inversion thinker. I want to think about what is the inverted principle that I'm thinking. So if I think about this thought, like, what if I opened the restaurant in my own office rather than having to walk across the street from the office, right? I'm thinking of something opposite. Yeah. But so I'm up here, I'm aware that there's this thought here, and I'm going to ask you to kind of correct my thinking about this. Okay. So metacognition, I'm thinking about the thinking, I'm looking at the evaluations, I'm looking at it from different angles. But if I don't do that, I'm basically operating on my default settings, my feelings, my inclinations, my kind of monkey brain. But if I'm able to cognate, I guess if that's the word, evaluate my thinking and analyze it for what it is, not from only from a practical or technical level about the scientific nature of that thought, but also from a level of realizing, does this lead me further away from my goals? Does it lead me to a life of greater legacy, greater relevance? Does this help the people that I love more than the alternative? All those things kind of compound into that. Yeah. And without doing that, you're left to live the life of a monkey.
You don't even get to ask those questions until you become aware of it. Because either you drive your thoughts or your thoughts drive you. Mm. And let me break this down for you a little bit, because this is the crux of what I call the positivity model. Yes. And in this model, it's all about becoming aware of two specific processes. We talk about our thoughts. I'm going to break that down for you into two very distinct categories of thought that matter. What you think matters. And so to go there, let's turn on the metacognition. Okay, you ready to play? Should we do this? Turn on the metacognition, think about your thoughts. And as you are thinking about your thoughts, I invite you to notice something that's totally obvious but unnoticed until it's called to your attention. You and I and every other human on the planet, you are constantly judging. Okay, now the nice word for that is evaluation. That's the one that I put in the model. Okay, but notice this, you constantly judge yourself. Pretty harshly sometimes.
Yes.
You judge your spouse, your kids, you judge your neighbors, you judge the economy, the weather, the government. You're judging me. It's cool, I'm judging you. Just notice that it's happening. Yeah. Why? Because our brain's job is to keep us safe. And to keep us safe, you have to constantly be monitoring the environment, asking questions like, is this safe? Is this dangerous? Is this good? Is this bad? All right, so you with me?
Yes, yes.
The word evaluation, and we'll use the nice word, okay? Because judgment is kind of a judgy word, but we're kind of judgy people,
Yeah,
really.
definitely.
So evaluation implies comparison with some standard. All right? So one of the questions that I often ask my audiences, I'll be there speaking, delivering a keynote or a training, and I'll say, am I a tall man? Now, Rick, you and I have never met face to face.
Yeah.
All you see me is here on Zoom. So maybe it would help if I were to show you a picture of me. Would that help?
Yeah.
Here's the picture.
Oh, wow.
Okay, what did you notice? Why did you say, oh, wow?
There's a tall-looking bald man next to you.
Yeah? And then I'm the one over here, right?
Yeah, but I'm also trying to figure out, is he freakishly tall?
Rick, I am 6'2".
Oh, wow.
Okay, this is Mark Eaton. He used to play center for the Utah Jazz. Still one of the top 5 shot blocking record holders in the NBA. 7'4".
Oh, my, world-class tall. Okay.
World class tall. Now, let me ask the question again. Am I a tall man?
Yeah, taller than most.
Okay, interesting. So you grabbed a standard, most.
Mhm.
You compared me to that, and you concluded that I am taller than most. But that's a different answer than you gave me earlier because you didn't know. You didn't have some standard. Even 6'2" is a standard. You compare me to that, you kind of know how tall I am. Now, when I'm standing next to Mark Eaton at 7'4", I'm a shrimp. I barely make his shoulder. Okay, so am I a tall man or not? Well, it depends. Notice your answer to that depends on what?
My perspective, but also probably who I am.
Yeah,
If I'm going to be a player, you're not a tall man.
I'm the same size as John Stockton. John used to play with Mark on the Utah Jazz. He was the shortest guy on the court. John and I are the same height.
Wow.
Okay, so this just gives a little perspective. You can't turn this off, meaning your evaluation or judgment. Your brain's job is to keep you safe. It has to keep evaluating. Evaluation implies comparison with some standard. And if you don't have a standard, you'll make one up. And you got a really good imagination. Okay, so going back to the model, let's just go back there for a minute. Since we're in psychology class now,
Yes.
you'll see on the middle of this model I've written what it is. And you've heard, it is what it is, which can be kind of annoying depending on who's saying it and why. But all it means is the way things are. So you look at your business, your relationships, your health, your circumstance, whatever it is what it is. What's your brain doing with what it is? Judging it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, notice this. Now on the model you see that on this end is better and on this end is worse. What I've discovered, and see if this is true, don't take any of this, just by my word. I want you to run it through your own filters and see.
Okay.
What it is, whatever it is always, and Rick, my editor, tells me to always avoid the word always. But I just used it. What it is always between better and worse by your own judgment, which you can't turn off. Now, is that true? I see the wheels turning, Rick. Is that true?
I think so, because I can never imagine something to be the worst possible version of itself. There's always going to be some turn of it that's worse. And same thing with it being better than it actually is. There's probably some other better scenario than I can imagine.
Always.
Always.
I mean, people say sometimes, well, the worst case scenario there is no such thing. Because you take whatever you think is the worst case scenario and add a hangnail.
Yeah.
It just that would be worse. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Is that true on the other end of it? No matter how good things seem, it could always be better.
I think so.
Yeah. Add whipped cream or another $1 or something. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if that is true, what it is neutral. Think about that. And when I say it's neutral, I don't mean that it's easy or painless. What it is might be extremely difficult and painful. Let me give you a personal example if I can. It was just a couple of years ago. I get a call from my oldest son. Dad, I have cancer. This is my oldest son, raising 5 of my grandkids. He's a brilliant engineer, works in the suburbs of Chicago. Cancer. Okay, now it is what it is. When we take what it is, and by the way, this is my details, all right? Mm-hmm. It's our story.
Yes.
Because when did you get that call? How did that land for you, right?
Yeah.
And the details are different, but this is our story, my details. Dad, I have cancer. It is what it is. Can I imagine anything better than that?
You could.
That's not hard.
Likely. Yeah.
I mean, what would be a better scenario than my son calling me and saying he has cancer? How about he doesn't have cancer?
Yes.
That would be better. By my measurement. Okay, so when we take what it is and we compare it, so this arrow on the bottom is our comparison, all right, okay, to the standard of better. When I compare to not cancer, how do I feel about cancer? It sucks. And Rick, you're always right about how you feel. How you feel is 100% consistent with the way your mind is doing this. And when I compare what I've got to something better, I feel worse about what I've got. All right, let's look at the other direction here. And I have to acknowledge at this point, I am a black belt in positivity. Okay? Because I practice it every day. I'm like a 6-degree master black belt at this. All right? And I saw my brain do this in real time. And I'm not expecting anybody else to do it the way I do. I'm just saying I have practiced this to the point where it happened for me quickly. There's the initial, what? Cancer? Wait, what? Okay, I had all that. And probably within a half hour of the news, my brain went here. Oh, I'm glad. Okay, that's a weird word. Mm-hmm. I'm glad it wasn't my daughter-in-law calling me and saying that her husband was just killed on the freeway.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, you caught it. My brain said, what would be worse? And I immediately came up with, okay, I'm not trying to figure out how to go out and support cancer treatments. I'm figuring out how to get there next week for a funeral. That, in my mind, would have been worse. I just talked to my son on the phone. That's better.
Yes.
Than he's dead. Okay, that's where my brain went. Now, when I take what it is, that I have cancer, and I compare it in my mind to something worse, like, I'm sorry, your son was just killed. How do I feel about what I've got?
It's a lot better. What you got is a lot better than what could have happened.
Notice what it is didn't change.
Yeah.
The only thing that changed was my evaluation of it, which I get to choose. Do you remember earlier when I said awareness precedes choice? Because until I'm aware that my brain is doing this, I'm going to default to my programming. And the programming is cancer is bad.
Yeah.
Is it bad? No, I'm stretching you here, Rick. Because what I'm suggesting is it's neutral.
It's neither bad nor good.
It's neutral. But my judgment, my evaluation of it is not neutral. And how we evaluate our what it is, no matter what it is. And by the way, I don't want to leave you hanging. My son's last set of scans after brutal, and they were only brutal compared to easier things, but after brutal cancer treatment over the course of a year, last set of scans showed no evidence of disease.
Praise God.
I'll take
Wow.
it. I'll take
Wow.
Because I can compare that to something worse, and I feel really good about that.
And so you had a neutral event in the end trigger a positive celebration because of what could have been.
Everything has upsides and downsides. I know that's a bold statement too, but I keep this little model right here on my desk. This is a three-dimensional model of the Yin and Yang, the ancient Taoist philosophy, that shows up in every major tradition, and you've read this in some of those ancient texts, haven't you?
Yeah.
And all it means is that there's opposition in everything. Meaning, even in cancer, and let's just use our story with my details for a minute because I brought that out. But I invite everyone who's listening in to insert your own details. Because that number one error we make as humans is we believe what we think. And one of the things we think is that my circumstances are extraordinary. Okay. Well, are they? How many dads have had that call? Dad, I've got cancer.
So many.
I'm not the only one. Extreme does not equal extraordinary. Okay, so believing my circumstances are extraordinary is one of the traps where we convince ourselves that this is bad. This is neutral. Cancer has upsides and downsides. Here's what I would invite you to try, and this is a brain hack. Okay, so think of whatever your what it is, and how you've been telling yourself this is bad. And notice that your brain is going to protest. You talked about the monkey mind, right?
Yeah.
The monkey mind is going to jump in and say, but this is bad. I know. And just pat your little monkey mind on the head and say, okay, just chill for a minute. We're going to do an experiment. What's good about this? Now, here's a quicker way to get there. The fastest way I know to get to a positive evaluation of what it is is gratitude.
Mm.
Okay, this is a brain hack. Ask yourself, what am I grateful for in this? And I mean, think about the cancer, whatever your cancer is. And I'm not saying be grateful for the cancer. I'm saying open it up. Okay, peel it back, look inside, rummage around in there, see what you can find in there that you are grateful for. In fact, if you'll do this for 5 days, just make a little list of 10 things that you're grateful for in the hard thing. Okay? And watch out, because your brain, the monkey mind maybe, is going to do this to you. It's going to say, well, what is there to be grateful for in this? And it's not even a question. It's a statement disguised as a question. It's a complaint. You hear the exclamation point? What is there to be grateful for in this? Watch your punctuation. Turn it back into a question. What is there to be grateful for in this?
Mm-hmm.
And you look around until you find it. You know what I found in that cancer? 9 trips to Chicago over the course of those treatments, where I got to hang out with my 5 grandkids and support those cancer treatments. Am I grateful for that? Yeah, I don't even live in the same time zone as any of my 8 grandkids. I was grateful, but now am I grateful for the cancer? See, that's a harder ask, but that's where I found it. Rick, it was in there. I guarantee if you ask it as a question, don't let it be a statement or a complaint disguised as a question. What is there to be grateful for? What am I grateful for in this, from this, because of this? Absent this, it wouldn't even exist in my life. What can I find that I'm grateful for? There's a relationship somewhere in there. There's an experience. There's knowledge. There's learning. Are you grateful for that? This is the hack.
Mm. I love that. I love that. And I find it incredibly helpful that you brought up the yin and the yang. Because when we look at the yin and the yang, we always see there's a bit of the yin hidden in the yang. There's a bit of the good yang hidden in the evil yin, the feminine yin. And that's what makes the two dance. That's why they dance. That's why they circle around one another. That's why they're fluid and they're always changing.
And they define each other even.
They do define each other. That's right. You would never know the darkness without the light.
Right.
You would never you never know what it was. And so I think that speaks very beautifully. And I appreciate you sharing that with us, Dr. Paul. I mean, that's incredibly helpful. If we look at the cancer as the causal agent into your recognition that there were blessings or things to be grateful for that came out of that cancer, I mean, what more hope could we have about all the devastating crap that we go through in our regular day, this trivial stuff?
Right.
I think about the words of James, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet with trials of various kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and in the end, perseverance gives you a crown of life. Like it's you rejoice because you recognize the onset of the trials, because you see those trials in the end produce something that you can be grateful for. You can find something to have gratitude for in the end.
You start to see the problem as an opportunity.
It's a cold thing for me to say that because it's your son that had the cancer. It wasn't my son. Mm-hmm. I see this because when I read the scriptures, when I read the Tao Te Ching, and I read these great works, there's these common themes and same kind of tools and exercises you work with us through, is that the outflow of the things that we assume that are the worst possible things, in the end, help us to evaluate more truly the things that we should have been grateful for in the end.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
I
was just going to comment about that, because what we're doing, remember the invitation was turn on the metacognition.
Yeah.
I'm not here to tell you how to think. I don't have that kind of authority. But I invite you to see that you are thinking. And you're doing it in two different ways. We haven't even talked about creation yet. Maybe we'll get to that still. In evaluation mode, we have to judge what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's the design, it's the divine design of our mechanism. We have to do it. And knowing that we can't turn it off, let's notice how we're judging what it is. And there are traditional ways to judge something like cancer, an illness, a diagnosis, a divorce, a bankruptcy. There are traditional ways that we judge it, and we know that we're right. This is bad.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm curious. What's the relationship between creation and the judgment? Like what's?
Ooh. Yeah, let's go there. Can we?
Yeah. Yes, please do, because I'm thinking Ten Commandments myself, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, so as you and I are both men of faith, the model that I'm sharing with you here is a psychological model for faith.
Okay.
I call it positivity because I can sell that. But it's the same process psychologically. By faith, we judge our circumstances. Okay, and two people can go through exactly the same experience, and one will say that it's bad, and another will say that it's good. In reality, it's neutral. But our judgment of it, our chosen belief about it, does it sound more like faith now? Our chosen belief creates an emotional energy. Okay? The energetic result of our judgment is what we take to the creation game. And it's like the currency that we get to go into creation mode with. Think about this for a minute. When we think that our life sucks, okay? And I had a client who was like, my job sucks. My boss is an idiot. Everybody that, okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get the picture, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to call his attention to this. I wanted to break that pattern. And so I said, wait. You have a job? And he laughed a little bit, but then he rolled his eyes. He's like, oh, okay. Right? Because he realized I'm judging this thing. Somebody's like, I'm having problems with my teenager. You have a son? What the heck? Right? I was just in Africa. A 13-year-old boy was having a conversation with me. He's practicing his English. He's like, this American is going to, help me practice my English. And we're having a conversation. I said, is there anything you want to ask me? And he's like, yeah. Do you have a ball? I'm like, here's a teenager asking me if I own a ball. Because he didn't. Right?
Wow.
And perspective. It's like, what? You have a ball? I was interviewing Gabe Adams on my podcast. 21 years old. The title of that episode, just track this, Rick. No arms. No legs. No problem. 21-year-old young man. And I showed up I had sprained my ankle a little bit playing basketball. And I'm like, oh, my foot hurts. And he's like, you have a foot? Okay, so pause and just notice how rich and abundant and blessed your life is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever that energy is what we take to the creation game. So let's just talk a minute about creation.
Okay.
I believe, and I think you can get on board with this, Rick, we are creators. Okay? And from a spiritual standpoint, as offspring of the supreme creator, what does that make us?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean we can become creators. We already are. Just like a puppy is already a dog. We have to create.
Yeah.
It's in our divine design. You with me on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's go to the metacognition. Think about your thinking. I get to illuminate the obvious. Have you noticed that you can make a mess?
Oh, yeah.
You've noticed?
Oh, yeah.
Your
Yeah.
spouse has noticed for sure.
For sure.
Now, some people get a little tipped over by this. And I've had people over the years, they'll come into my office and they're like, oh, my life is such a mess. Listen to this. And then they tell me about all the messes in their life. And I'm over here secretly thinking, wow, you are a powerful creator. The fact that you can make a mess is good news. And that catches people kind of off guard sometimes. But think about it. If you can make a mess, it means you can make. And that's good news.
Mm.
Now, make, that depends on a few things. Here's the other part that I want you to notice. In creation mode, or that I invite you to notice, what I want doesn't matter. I invite you to notice that in creation mode, we're talking about what is to be, and that doesn't exist yet. We haven't created it yet. And you don't know. Okay? Rick, if I were to ask you, how you doing next week? And you're a positive guy. You're going to be like, I'm doing great next week. You don't know.
I don't know. I'll be thinking about all the obligations of this weekend and next week.
We get into our head trash all the time, and then we come up with predictions. Oh, that's going to be terrible. I came off of my group coaching call just before we jumped on the podcast today. And one of my clients raised her hand. She came on for a little hot seat coaching, and she says, I'm going into surgery next week, and it's going to be so... And then she had her story, okay? She doesn't know. She doesn't even know for sure that she's going into surgery next week. But notice that we've got predictions, right? So the only place it exists, what is to be, is in our imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
Yes.
And in creation mode, everything that exists has to be imagined first. Do I have it here? I had an example of this, but I moved it to my other office. I've got a wood carving that I've whittled out with my knife, and it's got a beautiful wooden chain, fully articulating wooden chain. It's got 2 balls in a cage.
Oh, wow.
And I learned how to do this as a scout leader, because as I'm sitting with a bunch of Boy Scouts around a campfire, I got to get their attention somehow. And this is how I kept them around the campfire instead of having them go off and set fires in the forest, kind of thing. So I've carved this stick, and it's beautiful. Well, people ask me, how did you do that? And my answer is, you just cut off everything that doesn't look like that, which is true. And it implies that I can see this thing in the stick. And then I have to cut off everything that doesn't look like that. It implies that I've imagined it. I see it here. And you look around yourself. Everything that you see had to be imagined first.
Oh, yeah.
So go into the imagination here for a minute. And I'll go back to the model so you can see how this interacts. We don't know what is to be, but we've got a really good imagination. When we imagine that what's coming is even worse than what we already have, how do we feel?
Feel horrible. Feel horrible. And then it happens. And then it happens.
Well, because we've got something to do with it.
That's right.
So don't forget that part. We're actually active participants in the creation process.
You mean personal responsibility is part of this whole thing?
Oh, what a novel idea. Yeah. So this, my friend, is anxiety. All right. This red arrow on top, I'm a clinical psychologist. Listen to what I'm saying. Anxiety is when we predict or expect or anticipate worse things to come. It kicks our nervous system into fight or flight mode. That's a big threat. And our brain's job is to keep us safe. So it's going to go into fight or flight mode. We call that anxiety. Are we clear? This one is depression. Okay, in evaluation mode, when we judge are what it is to be bad, and it is compared to something better, that's depression. This is anxiety up here. What happens when we imagine or anticipate or expect or predict and even plan that what's coming is even better than what we've already got? How do we feel?
Feel pretty great.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel that? Can you connect with that? This is what we call hope. And hope is the number one preventative factor for suicide. Rick, in a period of 18 months earlier in my career, I lost 9 people to suicide. That is so tragic and unnecessary because the number one cure or preventative factor is available on demand when you understand how to operate the equipment. You don't know what's coming. Choose your position. And position, by the way, is synonymous with attitude. I learned that from my other son, who's a pilot.
I watched that video, altitude and attitude. Yes.
Yeah.
That was fascinating.
Attitude is position. I didn't even know it was an aviation term until he helped me to see this. You know, it's the position of the plane relative to the ground or the horizon. And a nose down attitude is heading into the hard stuff. Same thing in psychology. It has nothing to do with what it is. It has to do with your position relative to what it is. Are you taking a position that this is good? It is compared to something worse. Are you taking a position this is something bad? Well, it is compared to something better. Choose. Choose your position because this energy then follows you. You take it to creation mode. And that person that was complaining about his job, he would go home. Oh, my job sucks. My boss sucks. Everything sucks. And then he'd go home and yell at his spouse and kick the dog. Guess what? He's making it worse. What happens when we start from an area of profound gratitude for the rich, abundant life that we already have? Then how likely are we to go make an upgrade?
Yeah.
Do you see that?
And gratitude always has to be pointed to someone to whom to be thankful. You never, it's difficult to have gratitude for a thing without having the gratitude for the thing pointed to the source of the thing.
The source of the thing.
The source is always inextricably linked to the thing itself that you're showing gratitude. So you've got an intellectual capacity to judge the thing better or worse than what it is.
Right.
At the bottom, and then you have a creative capacity that's more of the imaginative. It's your imagination, imagining what the best possible, ideally the best possible scenario could be, or what the most optimistic thing this could become, or being open to whatever comes as everything's neutral. it's definitely not going to be as worse as it possibly can. And if it is something that looks bad, I can find some gratitude out of the circumstance. And that comes from the imaginative, the ability to put into place the external factors and reorganize them for your own benefit, for the benefit of those you love. It's your mind fashioning reality is what it ends up being from my perspective in the end, because it seems like you talk about the kicking the dog and the wife being upset. It's, if you can get one of these things right, the things on the exterior of your mind begin to work themselves out because you get one thing right. The others don't devolve into what it, the worst possible case. They begin to improve. They begin to compound without you having to interact with every single little thing along the line.
Yeah, what you're referring to here, Rick, is gravity. You ever get up in the morning and think, oh, I wonder if gravity's on today? Honey, have you checked the gravity report? I mean, it is. It's always on. I was in Kenya for a week. Gravity every morning. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are on our planet. There's gravity, right? So what if you're standing at the top of a tall cliff and you're thinking, yeah, gravity, whatever, I'm not down with that. And then you jump. Gravity doesn't care if you believe in it or not. We are creators. Like it or not, believe it or not, you're a creator. You're going to create something. And you are capable of creating a mess. When we judge or evaluate our circumstances to be bad, it creates an emotional energy that makes it more likely that we're going to go make a mess. When we approach creation from a place of profound gratitude for the richness that we already have, this is a paradox, really. It's a paradox. You can have the upgrade, and it's more likely that you'll get the upgrade when you realize you don't need one. This, the same son that got cancer, when he was 21, he had just returned from 2 years of volunteer missionary service for our church.
Wow.
He'd been doing this for 2 years. He learned Spanish. What a rich, abundant experience that was for him. And he came home and he wanted to buy a car. Okay, go figure. 21-year-old kid wants wheels. So I take him down to Mountain America Credit Union right here by my office, where I've been banking since 1984. And we go in and we sit down with the loan officer, and she's pulling up all of his information on her computer, and she's all excited to help us. And she gets this dark look on her face. And she looks at my son and she says, I'm really sorry. You don't qualify for this loan. Rick, it was only $3,000 for a little beater car that he drove for a couple of years after that. Didn't qualify. Okay, no surprises. He's a ghost in the credit system. He doesn't even have a job yet, and he's been gone doing missionary service for 2 years. No surprises. So I throw my hat in the ring. I'm like, how about if I co-sign on that loan? Let's try that. And she's like, oh, yeah, awesome, okay. And she starts pulling up my information. She gets an even darker look on her face. Okay, she looks at me and says, sir, that makes it worse, actually. Bankruptcy. Okay, chapter 1 in my book is all about that. Lightning strikes. I'd been through a bankruptcy. I had this big black eye on my credit report. I knew that. I was messing with her. Okay, but then I gave her another option. And this is where the paradox lives. I reached into my jacket. I pulled out $3,000 in cash, put it on the desk, slid it right over next to her, and I said, how about if I give you the $3,000 to lend my son, and then you let me co-sign on the note? That way we both build our credit. How does that sound? And she's like, oh yeah, we can give you good rates on that. Yeah, thanks for the good rates on my money. But here's what I learned from that, Rick. I mean, The paradox is this: you can get the loan as soon as you prove you don't need the money.
Mm.
Does that ring true in your
Yeah,
experience with banks?
that's right.
But that is very, very true in relationships. In business, go to the relationships for a minute. How many couples have come into this office and it wasn't their idea, it was her idea? Okay, you following?
Yeah.
And she's coming in like, we got to improve this marriage. And in a relationship, look at the model again. See, she's in creation mode. She's thinking about how can we go improve this? This seems like a good idea to her. He's in evaluation mode, and it sounds to him like you're not good enough. This isn't good enough. He goes into evaluation mode and he says, what are you talking about? We've got it good. He goes over here, which makes her nervous because she's in creation mode and she's like, this is never going to get any better if you're okay with how it is. And do you see the dynamic?
Yeah.
And so the paradox is you can have the upgrade. And the best way to get to that upgrade is to energetically get good with what it is. Make peace with what it is, the way it is right now without changing anything. This is peace right here. This is hope. You make peace with what it is. And from that energy, we can go make an upgrade all day long.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Isn't
I love
that
that.
fun?
And it seems like you need both things. You need the grounded reality of what really is, and you need sort of like the potential of what could be. Like if all you have is potential, you don't have anything really to work with. And if all you have is grounded reality, you don't have any opportunity for change. And you kind of need both those things, whether in a husband and a wife or a business partners, or even in the same person who's seen the thing as it really is, who has this awareness, right, of what it is, but also the situational awareness. Well, if we did this, then it would be a pivot toward this. He's using his imagination. And I think about that a lot when I think about our kids and our grandkids. This is something I wanted to ask you about. And by the way, those of you that have stuck around so long, we've been speaking for an hour, 40 minutes. We've only gone through the first question. We've only gone through the first question. We'll save the others for another day. But I want to know about kids and grandkids. How do we speak this message into their lives and train them in an environment, whether they're still at home or they're living in a different time zone? How to take up this responsibility to act with positivity and imagination and creation of not wondering what could possibly happen that would hurt you, but wondering what is possible, what could possibly happen that could excel me, and how can I be grateful for my situation? How can we train our kids and grandkids in that mode of thinking?
I've done a lot of parent training and coaching through my career, and I think that's one of the reasons why you're asking me that question.
Yeah.
Parenting is the number one personal development program on the planet. I mean, where else do you get auto enrollment? Lots of opportunities for practice, right? And huge rewards, potentially huge consequences either way. The reason that I've done all the parent coaching that I have is because that's the door for a lot of people. They'll go to YouTube, for example, to try to get help for their kids. Once they get inside of the door, they realize, oh, this is about me. Because I don't care what you say to your kids as much as what you show your kids and how you show up for your kids. And one of the difficulties we run into in parenting, you're asking, how can we teach them this? We live it, right? That's the best way to teach it to them. A lot of times parents are in creation mode. And you think about it, think about how your kids are doing in school, for example, okay? Now, parents always see the improvement. that could be made, right? And somehow we think it's our job as parents to make sure that they do that. We're in creation mode. Our kids typically are in evaluation mode. Their question is, how am I doing? Right? And if we come in hot on creation mode as parents, our kids experience that very negatively. And the message that they're getting is, you are not good enough. And not only that, you never will be. Which a parent would never consciously say to their kid. Who would ever say that to their kid? But when you're looking at the report card and you're saying, okay, how can we improve this? It's coming from the best place in your heart as a creator parent, and it's landing as a message that you didn't intend.
Yeah.
We join them here. What if you could join your kids, your spouse, your grandkids in a positive evaluation, in the rich, abundant life that they already live, in the goodness that they already bring to the world? What are they doing right? And then push the pause button.
Oh, I love that. Are there specific conversations we should be having with our kids and our grandkids, specific comments, specific assertions they need to hear?
I think they need to hear first and foremost, there's three messages. And I've modeled this, Rick. I heard this first from Foster Cline and Jim Fay.
Okay.
These guys are the authors of a really popular parenting approach called Parenting with Love and Logic. And I got to talk to Jim Fay on my podcast once, and he shared this with me as, and I think he'll appreciate this too, following the example of our Heavenly Father as a perfect parent. And the idea is that God, as if you think of God as our perfect parent, okay, sends us three powerful messages. And these are the messages. So when you ask, what do kids need to hear from us? Well, that's a pretty good example. So if we follow that example, three messages, here they are.
Okay.
Number one, I love you no matter what, and even if, and especially when. Okay, so the message is, I love you. And then I added three clarifiers to that. No matter what, and even if, and especially when. Okay, that's the first most powerful message. And we get deceived as parents sometimes, and we think our job is to make sure that they what? Make sure they do their homework, do their chores, become good citizens of the planet, make sure they stay close to the faith, make sure that they marry someone of the opposite gender, make sure that they, okay? What if our job is simply to love them, no matter what, and even if, and especially when? Okay, and I play the even if game with parents. Grandparents can play it too, right? Even if they become criminals. Yeah, that's when especially when kicks in, okay? Even if they come out of the closet and let you know that they don't want to marry someone of the opposite gender.
Dad, I'm going to marry a robot.
Especially when. Okay? Your job is love. And that brings some relief and anxiety to a parent's heart. Because if you think your job is to make sure that they, one of the moms right here in my office, she said, so am I just supposed to let him fail? She's all uptight about his performance in school. Just let him fail? And I'm like, what do you mean, let him? Like it's up to you? And she's like, oh, yeah, huh? Let him. Love him. Mel Robbins wrote a book. It's just killing it right now out there on the market. Let Them. The Let Them
Yeah.
Theory by Mel Robbins. I thought Mel did a really nice job with that. So that's message number one. Love them. Okay. I love you no matter what, and even if, and especially when.
Okay.
Message number two.
That's so good.
If you have any questions, ask. And that's your way of saying, I've been around for a little while. I'm trying to pay attention. I might know some stuff. But we're not cramming it down their throats. See, this is the subtlety.
Yeah.
I don't think our Heavenly Father crams it down our throats. He makes it available. You got scriptures, you got prophets, you got prayer. Come. I'm here. If you have any questions, ask. I'll be here.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a lecturer by nature, and it's not appreciated. That's not helpful either.
I know. And how many times does that have to fall flat before we finally figure it out?
Yeah.
I don't know. If I ever hit that number, I'll let you know. But yeah, me too. I am a teacher. You can kind of tell. I get into, let me help you. Let me teach you something. But as parents, I think it's really powerful to just, hey, I'm here, open, available. Door is always open here. Message number 3. Good luck. That's one of the hardest ones for us as parents. It's our way of acknowledging and honoring their sovereign agency. The greatest gift I think that we have as humans, next to life itself, is the power to direct that life and to choose for ourselves. And as parents, sometimes we ignore that and we're like, no, I'm going to make sure that you, whatever. Yeah.
That's so powerful.
Good luck. And don't forget 1 and 2. I love you no matter what, and even if and especially when. And if you have any questions, ask. I am here for you. I'm squarely on your team. Good luck.
What a wonderful way to end. So helpful, Dr. Paul. I think you have some resources on your website. Would you tell us a little bit about that? I think you had a book at one time.
Well, I can even do you one better than that, because I came thinking, okay, is there a gift that I can just give to whoever? If you're still here, you deserve a gift. Okay?
It's a reward.
And we can put this in the show notes or whatever, Rick. If you go to drpauljenkins.com, drpauljenkins.com, do a /Rick. R-I-C-K.
Oh, wow.
All right? And you can go test that, Rick, if you want to. What I've prepared for you is a free digital download of my mini book, Portable Positivity. And this is where I walk you step by step through that model that we talked about today. Okay? There's even the picture of me and Mark Eaton is in there.
Ah, cool.
Go grab this. What you're going to get is this model, step by step. I'll walk you through it. Okay? drpauljenkins.com /Rick. That is my gift to you for sticking with us through this podcast. I hope you got something useful from that. And yeah, I've got websites, I got YouTube, I got podcasts and things too. But that's where I would start. Go get the mini book. This is what will change the game as you learn how to operate the equipment. What you do with it after that is up to you. I'm not going to tell you how to think. That's up to you. I want you to see that you are thinking, and it matters what you think. So that's what I'm offering primarily today, Rick.
And we'll put the link down in the show notes. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Paul. Have a blessed rest of the day. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, DM me over on LinkedIn. You can just search Rick Walker TX. You can just Rick Walker TX over on LinkedIn. Feel free to DM me there. And you can watch this video next to help move your family, move your legacy, move your wealth and your wisdom to the next level. Thanks, guys.